access this call through telephone or video conferencing, and members of the public will have an opportunity to provide comments at the end. And we are recording this meeting. So first order of business is approval of the December 16th meeting. Can I have a motion to approve? Are there any, first, are there any omissions or corrections? Or
They look good to me. I move to approve.
is there a second? Second. All those in favor? Those opposed? All right. The meeting's minutes are approved. So we're going to turn to the executive director's report. Ivandro, you want to
Yes.
start us off?
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair. As always, I want to say welcome to the members, to the commissioners. In fact, I know we're in February, but this is the first meeting of the year of the commission. So I want to say Happy New Year, and want to say Happy New Year and welcome to all of our guests, as well as members of the public who are in attendance with us today. I just want to touch upon a couple of things that I think the commissioners should know. And then obviously we got a robust conversation with members of BAJ as well as BPS to discuss. So I'm excited for the meeting today. First and foremost, I want to say thank you for all of you that attended our event last month. I know all the commissioners were able to attend. We had an event for those that were not able to attend on the Black males in America in healing and our marginalization. That was attended by at least around 50 people via Zoom. It was a great panel discussion. I want to give kudos certainly to Commissioner Lee, who unfortunately I don't think is able to attend the meeting today, as well as Judge Leslie, Commissioner Leslie Harris, who were instrumental in putting that event together. Also, I want to flag a couple other things again that happened over the last couple, I guess several weeks, I should say. Including the fact that, as you know, Chairwoman, you and I and Susan, our main key staff member, who's been very helpful to us, attended several meetings with city councilors, and we will be continuing to have those conversations with city councilors. And those city councilors that we were able to meet with were City Councilor Ricardo Arroyo, City Councilor Mejia, Julian Mejia. And in fact, unfortunately, we weren't able to meet with incumbent acting Mayor Kim Janey, but we did meet with our staff as well. And so these discussions were really just updating them in terms of what the commission has been up to and hear their ideas about, how we can work together. Another meeting that should be coming up soon is with Councilor Lydia Edwards, who's out of East Boston. And finally, also Councilor Flynn has been in contact with the commission and in fact sent us a letter asking us to pay close attention to LGBTQ residents and to take proactive steps in preventing acts of discrimination against those residents. I received that letter earlier in the year, last month, and I'll be sure to forward it to you all for your review. And I did ask him for a meeting as well, because I know he's very interested on the issues that we're working on. The other couple of things that I wanted to mention is in relationship to the police task force, to be exact, the police reform task force. As you remember, last meeting that we had in December, the commission decided that we should send a letter to the commissioner of BPD to ask for an update on the implementation status of the task force recommendations. You saw the letter, and we sent a letter on January 19th, and that letter went to Commissioner Gross. Obviously, excuse me, unfortunately, fortunately for him, I should say, he's retired since. I also CC Dennis White, who was then the chief of staff for Commissioner Gross, and since became commissioner. I know all of you are aware of some of the dynamics, unfortunately, that's been going on at BPD, but I wanted to update you on that regard. And in that same note, subsequently to sending the letter, I had a meeting with our Chief Crockett, who, as you know, the commission, this commission, the Boston Human Rights Commission, is part of Chief Crockett's, cabinet. That is the that is the Cabinet of Equity and Inclusion. I had a conversation with her about this space, particularly again, in terms of the task force recommendations. And she assured me that, the city, and she in particular, had been leading a lot of this effort and was in the final stages of hiring the executive director of the Office of Police Accountability and Transparency, which is, as you know, OPET. She also mentioned that she was in contact with BPD about starting up the diversity and inclusion unit, which is another recommendation made. And finally, the issue of police use of force, which was also a major topic in the recommendations by the members of the task force. And she also actually mentioned that she was still in touch with members of the task force. As you know, all of you should know, commissioners, that particularly Chairwoman McKenna and I talked to several members of the commission, of the task force before we embarked on this journey of sort of playing an oversight role, in terms of the recommendations of the task force. That's more or less what I had, except that I did want to flag that, particularly for members of the public, that we are in the final stages of approval for these several staff hirings that we've certainly discussed several times in the past, which are in no particular order: policy and research analyst, education and outreach coordinator, program manager, and investigator. Those are 4 positions that we're hoping to open to hire by the end of this fiscal year, by June, hopefully. And on that note, actually, and I know Commissioner Reyes is present with us and can fill us more on this. We have 2 interns from UMass that have come on board to help us, UMass PhD grad students, to work with us, particularly on the space of figuring out and fleshing out, I should say, more. In fact, the topic that we're here for today, the digital divide, and another intern. I think actually I might even saw them in attendees. They were one of the attendants present here today. The last person, the other intern will focus on helping us look at other human rights commissions throughout the country and seeing what they're doing, particularly under COVID, particularly, partnering with city agencies and other nonprofits and other agencies throughout their space to see how we can continue to do the work that we've started now a year. In fact, kudos to all of you commissioners again. Obviously, we didn't meet until June of 2020 through Zoom, but you know that you were all appointed by this time by Mayor Walsh. And, we've been on this together for a year now. Commissioner, Chairwoman McKenna, that's all I had.
Yep.
Happy to take any questions, but, really just wanted to update on some broader things that are happening within the department as we get going this year.
So just so people know, if you heard, we did send the letter, and then
Yes.
the Commissioner of Police resigned. So, we now will have to wait until the situation settles down before we can really follow up in regard to that. But we will follow up as soon as that situation is firmed up, whether or not Dennis White becomes the Commissioner of Police or what happens. But we intend to follow up. Ben, you had a question?
Yeah, refresh my memory. I think we had put a date in the letter by which we wanted to hear something?
The date, actually, if I remember correctly, Commissioner, it was today, in a sense that the letter said that we wanted to have an update by our next meeting.
Yeah.
Which is today. So
does it make sense to just sit, or should we send it to Chief Wong? And I don't know if it makes sense to. But by way of background, Evandro and I used to work together at the Suffolk DA's office a long time. And the person who's the legal advisor to the Boston Police Department worked. I don't know if you knew Dave Fredette.
I did, and to be honest, I was thinking back then to even CC him, and
maybe just call him up and say,
okay.
We know you're. It's understandable that there's
right, sure.
Right.
There's a lot going on there, but
There's
we're
a
still
lot going on there, right?
Yeah.
But there's no reason they can't start answering.
Oh, absolutely. I
Yeah,
just
yeah.
I understand why.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
I think-
then I think it's a good idea. Evandro, why don't you follow up? with
Yes, I will.
couple
yeah.
And send him a copy of, why don't you send him a copy of our letter and then follow up with a phone call and tell him that our plan was to next, if we hadn't heard from them, send them a letter asking them about specific things, but we haven't done that because of all the changes in the, you
Mhm.
know, of what's going on, and talk to him about it and see where they are.
I
And
will.
there's
I will.
some of those things that they could just answer. In fact, if they have created a unit on diversity and inclusion, you know, they could tell us. I don't think they have yet, but I'm particularly interested, to tell you the truth, on the population in the new cadet program. Who is in that cadet program? How many of them are people of color? How many of them are women? And have they been recruited? Have they started? And if they have, I want to know how many of them are people of color and how many of them are women. So can you ask him that? Because
I will, except that the cadet program for BPD, in fact, some of those cadet members, if you will, already became police officers. And so there could be another rollout, but
Right.
the newest program is in the space of the fire department.
no, I know that, but I'm curious about the next class, because I think
Okay.
they're doing it all the time. But
Yes, okay.
the emphasis has been on recruiting Black and brown. Let's ask him when the next cadet class
Okay.
is coming in. And then, you know, when we know that, we can find, I think we should keep our eye on
Mhm.
the composition. So find out when.
Okay.
And while we're doing that, why don't we find out when the first cadet class at the fire department is starting? Susan, why don't you find that out? Maybe we can have you apply.
No, thank you. I'm scared of fire.
Yeah. You know, I think
It won't matter. It won't matter. So
Do you not like my meeting minutes? I'd rather do the meeting minutes.
I think she was interested in the police department, and I think that ship has sailed too.
All right.
She loves her new job.
Yes.
Why don't we find out those
Mhm.
those two things? That would be helpful. So what I would suggest, if we can, since our guests are here and I don't want to keep them waiting too long, is turn to our guests, because we do have, Reza's going to tell us about what's going on at UMass Boston with our 2 PhD students. And maybe that can be wound in with this discussion because it's broadband.
Yeah.
And then we can talk about update with the other student who's doing a broader brush looking at other human rights commission. And I will just tell you now that I'm in discussion with the compliance clinic at BU Law School to do work and some help with the police department in terms of what other police departments have done in terms of reform, how it's been done, at what pace, and that sort of stuff. So they've agreed to help us. So that's another university that's involved. But so by the next meeting, that should be underway as well. So I want to welcome our guests. Thank you for joining us. We've been talking about broadband, I think almost from the first meeting we had or second meeting we had. We've been very concerned, as I know all of you have been, Mark, I know, in terms of education. And since we've been in remote learning, that every child had access to high quality broadband and had the equipment to go with it. So not kids with a cell phone sitting in somebody's parking lot trying to do homework on a cell phone. And since COVID in particular, that we've thought about all of the things with both information about COVID, telemedicine, you know, the ability, since it's so isolating, COVID has been so isolating, the ability of folks to see their children and grandchildren, and how access to broadband and the internet is so useful to older people and anybody. So having you guys here from Boston Housing is very helpful. And our interest too is that we've learned is about folks who are in recovery, and how that's been such a huge thing for them. And if you're looking for a job, how do you look for a job without access to? And we talked to JBS about their folks and looking for jobs, and what a difficult thing that was, and also how they had to switch to all remote learning, and hardly any of their folks had either a computer or access. So Mark, why don't we start with you? Why don't you tell us where you are now? I know I have some idea of the amount of work you folks have done for your students, but why don't you tell us where you are now and what's occurred?
Sure.
Tell
So
who you are and what your job is.
Mark Racine, I'm the Chief Information Officer for the Boston Public Schools, resident of Jamaica Plain. And I have, over the last year, worked all hours of the day to see if we can solve this problem without any advance notice as our students went home. So it's been a long year, but at the same time, it's been extremely rewarding in that we have made enormous progress to closing the digital divide. I will say it is never closed, but we've made a lot of progress over the last year, due in part to a huge commitment from the city. Before we made the decision to close, right from the top, from the mayor saying, we're not going to let any student fall behind. And so, you know, I could characterize our efforts in twofold. The first was devices, and the first was internet access. The device problem, while it was not as significant as we originally thought, it absolutely grows over time, especially as more and more students are sharing devices with family members. When you are using a device at home, you're going to see a much higher amount of devices being broken or stolen or lost. But we have made purchases in excess of about, I'd say 55 to 60,000 Chromebooks in the last year, distributed to families and to students directly, either through our distribution sites or through their school. At this point, it is really around maintenance, and just as an example, we repaired about 1,000 Chromebooks over the February break. So it is still quite an immense effort to keep that fleet up and running. But I'm very satisfied that our students, our families, have access to a device, whether that is a personal device, which is about 20% of our families are using a personal device, or a district device, which is, as you can imagine, 70 to 80%. Sorry, well, I think I got my numbers wrong. 30%, 20 to 29% of students are on a personal device, and 70% are on a district device. The big conversation for this, though, is around internet access. And when we pivoted to remote, there were two immediate things that happened that allowed us to go from what we estimated to be around 92, 93% of students on at home broadband up to right now, we are calculating between 98 and 99%. The first one being that a lot of service providers, both Comcast and Starry were the big ones, opened up their services and allowed families to jump onto some of their low cost broadband services. Internet Essentials being the biggest one that most people know about. They opened up their service for new customers for 90 days or 60 days for free. At the time, we thought, oh, it's only going to, 60 days is plenty of time. Since then, we have adopted a program called the sponsorship program, where through a grant from the Department of Education, we can pick up the tab as soon as that 60 days expires. So if a family jumps onto Internet Essentials, they get the service for free for 60 days, and then we provide them with a voucher. They essentially turn that voucher over to Comcast, and the bill comes to us instead of to the family. Challenge being that you still have to sign up for the service, right? And that's one of the challenges that we still see is getting families to subscribe, getting them to get through the subscription service is easier said than done. At the other side of things, though, if that is not an option, if you are not in a stable housing environment, we have a lot of families that are moving back and forth. We also have a grant to provide any student that they need with a hotspot. The hotspots, we've done a couple of different providers over the course of the last year, but the hotspot right now is through a grant program called the 1 Million Project, which has grown to the 10 Million Project. That is a fancy name of basically just saying that they want to provide 10 million students with access to internet. I'm always going to put the caveat down to say that a hotspot is not sufficient. It doesn't matter what the provider is. It doesn't matter what service or plan you have. If you are in a concrete metal masonry building, you are not going to get the same cell signal as somebody who is in wood or outside for all that matters. So we try to say, the hotspot, when we give those out, we should make sure that we've exhausted efforts to get a family onto broadband first. But as I mentioned before, families are moving, students are going between houses. My own family, I've got two niece and a nephew in the Boston Public Schools, and they're moving between 2 to 3 houses every so often. And I've had to jump on the phone with my mom and my dad and make sure that they can get their internet up and running and that they're able to provide broadband access while they're watching over the kids. So, those are the efforts that we've done over the last year. And I can pause there before I kind of talk about some of the challenges or some of the issues that we still have to resolve. So if anybody has any questions, or I can turn over to the next speaker.
So if people have questions, I have some, but why don't I defer, commissioners?
I have some questions.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, regarding a question and a note. Regarding the Internet Essential, it is my understanding that trying to subscribe requires a lot of information, some of which is not necessarily easy for families to come up with. And so I know that some of my own students report that although it's great that the city offers that, they cannot use it. So they're using the hotspot. Making things a little more complicated, Comcast just tried to raise their prices in the city of Boston. In a way that was at the very least amoral. I know that there's some legislatures are trying to stop that, but this seems to be a provider that is not doing too much, although it seems to be, they say they're doing too much. It doesn't seem to me that they're doing a lot. So that is complicated. On the other, finally, I completely understand that BPS is overwhelmed. We are all overwhelmed, and that the system was not created to be run online, remotely. Neither was UMass Boston. So I completely appreciate your work. I'm just stating that for the record, Comcast seems to be not only convoluted, but also kind of predatorish.
So can I follow up, Mark, before you answer, which is who is in charge of these forms that the families or individuals have to fill out for Internet Essentials? Who says you have to fill out this paper? You, Comcast, the government, who?
There's a lot to respond to. So, in terms of the sign-up process, that is by far the biggest barrier that we see. Not just with internet, but with any service where you do have to sign up and pay an ongoing bill. That sign-up processes can be challenging. We definitely have heard the challenges from our families. We have worked very, very closely with Comcast. We have a representative who, when we run into difficult situations, and we run into these situations at least once a day, we are able to get a family to the representative who's able to work with the family and get them through paperwork, the bureaucracy, or whatever challenges. In every circumstance other than one, she has been able to work through any sort of challenges that the family has. The problem, though, is that by the time the family reports an issue to us, they may have spent hours on the phone with Comcast's help desk trying to get subscribed. And
Comcast, Mark, this is a Comcast form, not a government form. So this
correct.
is a Comcast created problem.
I can't definitively say that everything that Comcast makes a family sign up is their own created. There may be a chance that there are certain forms or certain parts of the sign up process are required by the FCC, who does govern these kinds of things. But at the same time, there's no paperwork from Boston Schools. We hand a family a voucher. There's nothing that they sign. There's nothing that we ask of them. I just give them the voucher and say, I want to pay your bill. But by the time a family comes to us and says, I tried and it's really not working, they don't want to call back. And so, we have had, I would say it's been a rough time with the families that need the most help, getting them through that sign up process. Comcast, Starry, RCN, and Verizon are the four major providers within the city of Austin. I think the sign up process is equally difficult for all of the four of the vendors. With the Internet Essentials program, with the voucher, it gives us a dedicated phone number, first off, that we can give to a family to say, call this number instead of the main line. That we know that when the Comcast person picks up the phone, they know this is a school person with a voucher, that they know that they are also eligible for the service. But it has been a back and forth with Comcast to say, hey, this is the experience that a family had. Comcast has said that they've done debt forgiveness, where they will forgive any pre-existing debt that a family has. We've had mixed results with families calling and getting, one person who kind of works them through that process, and then another is more of a roadblock. And that was, even today, where here we are 4 or 5 months after we've started this program, I've got a family who has a pre-existing debt and they could not get through the call center. So, we are very lucky that we've got a fantastic representative on the back end of Comcast, but I do share your frustrations. I do share your concerns that I wish that we didn't have to get to that point. I wish that the customer service was such that anybody could call and it was, as easy as signing up for Hulu or Netflix. But that is a challenge that we have. There are other services, there are other low-cost services that you may hear of the Lifeline program that the government offers. This has gone through a number of iterations, but it is $15 off of your internet bill if you're a low-income family. But there is another sign-up process. There is a government form. So the Lifeline program, while it is another financial assistance to a family, it is another form. And every time you have a form, you're going to have families back off, or they're going to be concerned about the information or where it is going. Even that alone, the fear of writing down sensitive information and sending it to a company is concerning to folks. And even the first few months, there was the rumor going around was that you needed to have a social security number to sign up to Comcast, which is not true and has never been true. But that rumor was out there, and that has prevented a number of families from signing up as well. So these barriers to sign up, the rumors, the challenges, the pre-existing debt that you might have, these are all major barriers. And if you've seen in the news, the FCC or the government is announcing the broadband initiative, which is in essence $50 off of your monthly bill, which is huge, right? You can sign up for a much higher plan and have $50 a month. At the current point, right, and it's still open for questions, you still have to sign up through Comcast, and then you'll get the discount. And so we still see an enormous benefit coming after the major barrier that families are going through right now.
So have you or anyone, like the mayor or somebody, the governor, had this conversation with Comcast?
Yeah, and you know, we've had conversations over many years. In fact, Internet Essentials was first brought to Boston in 2014, 2015. It was when we went to community eligibility lunch that Comcast first said, because all students are eligible for free lunch, that means that they're all eligible for this program. We didn't push the program. We really didn't, because there were too many barriers. And that was one of the things that every time we met with Comcast, they'd say, oh, we really love for you to, you know, send a flyer home or let families know about this program, and say, we're really having a tough time getting behind it. And here are the reasons why. Comcast has made enormous strides. When I compare where it is now to where it was 5 years ago, it is night and day. And most recently, they just announced that they're doubling the internet speeds. They've pushed off that internet cap, that charge that they were going to do, but there's still barriers, and it is very challenging. And it is something where, as fantastic as our rep is, it is a national issue, and it is something that all of my counterparts in other large districts are still struggling with.
So this is a national policy to fill out these complicated forms?
It is a national program, yeah. So they don't have,
Program.
yeah, they don't have specific Boston Public Schools forms or specific to Massachusetts or.
So this is a form that they don't understand has a disparate impact on folks that English is a second language, or, yeah, people.
Yeah, the call center is in English and Spanish, but
Any
Boston
other language,
has
no.
many other languages that are not supported by the call center.
And I talked to Mike Lynch a couple of weeks ago, and he said there's a $3.2 billion fund coming down. And the Boston and LA and Chicago and others are lobbying to have the funds not go to the providers. These funds, these 3.2 billion, are going to the providers. They're going to Comcast and Verizon.
Right.
And individuals will have to apply.
Right.
Have the same exact problem we have now. And they're lobbying to say that the city or the school system, the nonprofits, could apply on behalf of their clients or students, because this is a terrible problem. And by giving the money to Comcast, you don't solve the problem.
Yeah, you know, there are definitely, there are pros and cons to the model that they're having, but it is something that we've expressed some concerns around, especially because we are seeing that barrier. You know, when we go back to our vouchers that we have a grant from the Department of Education for $400,000 to pay for home internet. I cannot give these things away. I cannot get them to be used. And you know, I have not seen the latest bill in a few months. We do get a bill of which ones are used. You know, we get about, I think we've gotten around 3,000 vouchers, maybe 1,500 or so, or 2,000 have been given out to families. A fraction of that have been actually used.
Wow.
And so of this $400,000 bill, I think, you know, over the first couple of months of the program, I think we were looking at $10 to $15,000 has actually been utilized.
So have you used Tech Goes Home to try to do this?
Yeah, Tech Goes Home has been very helpful, but you know, some of the challenges that we're hearing from families are they're having a tough time getting through the call center, even when they have an employee, a BPS staff member helping them through, being on the call with them. The pre-existing debt thing is something that, you know, we can get through that, but it is a barrier when you first call. The other thing too, which is harder to calculate, and I've heard rumors, although I really can't, you know, definitively say this, but you know, the Internet Essentials is your basic plan.
Right.
And it is your basic plan. If I go to, you know, I'll give you the example of when I go to Best Buy, and if I need to buy a wireless router, they're going to tell you, how many devices do you have in your house?
Right.
This is the router that you should buy.
Mm.
I've heard from some families that when they call a call center, the person who's trying to help them through is trying to help them decide which plan is best for them. I have 3 kids, 4 kids.
Right.
Maybe the Internet Essentials program is not the right one.
Yeah.
Maybe you're going to need a higher tier. So that upselling thing is another challenge that we have heard from some families, is that, you know, that Internet Essentials, we're very excited that they just doubled their speeds, but how many families have gone to sign up with a voucher to get Internet Essentials only to be sold a higher level package that they may need or they may not?
Can I ask you if it matters what part of the city they're in terms of their ability to access high-speed fiber optic, as opposed to some of the parts of the city that don't have the same access?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So what we've done over the last few months, we used to rely on survey data. Now with everybody being home and they're logging in through Zoom, they're logging in through our systems, we're actually able to calculate that speed. We're able to see what a student's internet speed is without having to ask them. We can see who's on Comcast or Verizon. We can see what their internet speed is. For the most part, if you're on Comcast across the city of Boston, the difference between East Boston, Mattapan, and West Roxbury, Jamaica Plain is insignificant. We're not seeing any disparities or differences by the neighborhood that you live in. We do see differences by the internet service provider that you're on. And that is where there are disparities between, you know, Verizon Fios. We're seeing much faster upload speeds compared to Comcast. Verizon's only available in certain neighborhoods at the moment. It is growing. Or if we do see a student logging in through a mobile access point, you are definitely going to see a difference in the quality of speed that they have. So provider between, you know, families that live in a neighborhood who have Comcast, we don't see that much of a difference, but we do see a difference from internet service provider to provider.
Okay, so let's go to the, if we can, to the housing folks. And then maybe after we could ask you, Mark, and them, you know, is there anything anyone can do to make this situation better? I mean, is it money? Is it power? The new mayor? Is it the governor? Is it the legislature? What would you recommend if you were king or queen? What would you recommend? That's what I'd like to hear after we hear from, why don't you introduce yourself, Lydia or Joel?
Yeah, good evening, Madam Chair and Commissioners and Director Carvalho. My name is Joel Woolham, Special Advisor for Policy at the BHA. I'm joined by Lydia Agro, who's our Chief of Staff, and Administrator Bennett is not available, but she sends her regards. And this is a topic that's very important to her. So we're glad for the opportunity to chat. I did prepare some slides. I can share them. If we want a more interactive forum, I've sent them to to Susan. So you can view them afterwards otherwise, or I'll run through them now. So it's completely up to you, Madam Chair, the Commission, what you prefer to do.
I have no idea what they are, so it's hard for me to say. It's up to you.
All right, I'm going to present the slides. If you need us to either move faster, or if you care to interrupt, just please do so.
How long do you think you will take? So we have an idea. 10 minutes?
10 minutes. I think we'll go through some of them quickly, and then you can review.
All right. Okay.
Yeah. So let me just get these up. Is this visible to you?
Yep.
Great. So I will move through the intro pieces pretty quickly, but we at the BHA, we have done a lot of missioning, visioning, rebranding and whatnot. So I did want to just present our updated mission that the Housing Authority has. And you'll have the slides so you can enjoy this statement here. BHA is the largest public housing authority in New England. We have about 60 developments. We house about 9% of the city's residents, and we're also a major employer. And in terms of who we're housing, it's about 10,000, roughly units of public housing, and then another 14,000 some people who have either mobile vouchers, so for example, Section 8, or project-based vouchers. Today, we're going to be mostly talking about digital equity initiatives that relate to public housing. So that's just some context. I'm not going to go through all of this, but I just wanted to make the note that we are housing and helping to subsidize the housing of thousands of residents, majority people of color, many non-English speaking at home. The majority are extremely low income, and quite a number whose primary language is not English. So just in terms of our digital equity initiatives, as I noted, we serve thousands of extremely low income households and as well as seniors during COVID, as the commission has noted, as BPS has noted, and I know that Do It has been here as well. We know that internet access affects learning, affects isolation and socialization, and that having strong access strengthens healthcare access, ability to search for jobs, safe recreation. We are partnering with the city of Boston on several initiatives, and the city is contributing resources in a way that are helpful to us. And BHA is also deploying its own resources to address this issue. We have a range of initiatives that affect community spaces, individual households, our operations, and a new housing service center. So I'm not going to go too much into our operations, but what I'll say briefly is just that we are modernizing a lot of BHA things so that they are electronic, faster, and that are where people will, with COVID out, physically apply for vouchers if they're doing so in person, or apply for housing, excuse me, if they're doing so in person, is a much more consumer-friendly space. So we're looking at this across in multiple ways. We conducted a survey last summer that established a baseline of resident internet access. We had done one in the past, it was not current, so we decided last summer during the pandemic, it was a good time to do another round of that. The survey that we conducted last summer was sent to all public housing residents in English, Spanish, and Chinese, which is the three most common languages. We had close to 700 respondents, and majority in English, significant, about over 100 came in Spanish. More from family sites, but we also got several hundred from our elderly disabled buildings as well. So what did we learn from that? The basic question, that we're asking is, do you have internet access at home? And as you can see from this, and this includes both elderly and family sites, we had about 1 in 4 households say no. So among the elderly households who answered, it was closer to 1 in 3. And if you pull out our family sites, it's really more like 1 in 5. So it's clear, and actually if I will go once further. Yeah, so among Spanish language surveys, and we did get more than 100, so we didn't get a real significant amount of Chinese language surveys, but in the Spanish, it was also 1 in 3. So both in the elderly population generally and in Spanish language speakers, our survey did indicate at least that we had significantly lower internet access, and even in the general population, I think 1 in 5 even for the family sites, it's higher than we would like. We want everyone to have access. So some of this is draws right from what Mark and what BPS shared, but just in terms of there are a number of residents. Comcast is universally available in public housing. There are a number of residents using Internet Essentials. The sign-up process generally for internet, I think the Comcast process is particularly burdensome. We we do see a need for other free or low cost options. And it's, we're in addition to sort of the internet service and the device, we think that for a number of residents, I would perhaps particularly the elderly disabled populations, that the training, sometimes one-on-one assistance or otherwise directed training is really important to sort of activate that internet service or to make it useful to them. We know that residents need internet access at home. We're also, BHA does not currently have, universal sort of in our common areas, wireless access. We have some free connections that were provided as a sort of concession from either Comcast or Verizon to certain community spaces. So we're, we'll talk a little bit more in a minute, but we're working to expand that substantially. And then finally, we do know that, the burden will be a lot greater, or the disparity would be a lot greater, but BPS's efforts have been really huge. So that is helping a lot of public housing families. I wanted to take a moment just to try to categorize a bit the initiatives that we have. And I should just mention, Lydia, our Chief of Staff, if you want to jump in at any time, please do.
Mm-hmm.
So Lydia, do you want to?
Do you want me to jump in?
Yeah, why don't you cover some of this?
Yeah. So and I mean, just to some of Mark's points, we do find we've reached out to all the residents that we received survey responses back that said either they didn't have a connection or needed help in some way because the connection they had was too expensive, and did talk to them about the Internet Essentials option, helped some of them sign up. But I would agree with Mark's comments around that it's difficult. And within the BHA population, I feel generally speaking that, the folks that have connections have been they've been able to figure it out. And the folks that don't need more help, right? It's not either with the form or using a device or understand. I mean, it's not good enough to get somebody connected if they don't know how to use a device or don't know how to log on to something. So it kind of, that there's a need for support for some of those residents, especially the elderly folks who want to be connected, but need additional support really to make it useful for them. And just to go back to the slide for a minute. So the city is rolling out fiber cable to all of the BHA developments. And we're working on building that out at the point that it gets to the site to install free public area Wi-Fi in those common areas of the sites, which is kind of spotty right now. And it does, we can talk about like what will work when we get to that conversation. But I think one of the things we really need to be mindful of is sustainability. And there have been past attempts where things have happened that have improved the situation at BHA for a certain period of time, but because of the grants that those were done under and the lifetime of those grants, then they went away, for example. So we really want to put something in place that's going to be long-term and not just like a year or two, providing free common area Wi-Fi in the community rooms and the public spaces that BHA can ensure is going to stay there is sustainable. It's not going to like come and then go. We're working on some the public-private partnership piece. We're rolling, we have an agreement with Starry that we just kind of confirmed with them, and they're going to implement throughout the BHA portfolio, the option both for residents to subscribe to their $15 a month service. So right now, BHA residents do not have access to that because Starry is not an internet service provider that's connected into BHA developments for the most part. The only subscriber that BHA residents have access to across the board is Comcast. And that is one of the challenges. There's just not enough internet service provider options out there for people that are affordable and easy to connect to. And Starry is also, as part of that, going to provide some free common area Wi-Fi in about 20 of our locations, as well as the $15 per month option for all BHA residents. We do expect that to take some time to get into place, but that is part of our plan. And then BHA would provide the free common area Wi-Fi in these spaces that Starry is not going to do it in, at sites that Starry will not be providing that in.
Mhm.
We've also, for those spaces, purchased some desktop computers to put in common area spaces, and some computers also for our resident leaders. There's a lot going on with our resident leaders, so we need to make sure they have access, and then we also need to make sure that there's some public ability within the common area spaces for residents who live in the buildings to have access. And those computers we have them. We received them recently. I mean, they were ordered months ago, but it's taking a lot of time to get computers these days because everybody's ordering them. And those are starting to be distributed throughout the BHA sites.
On the last piece, Mark had mentioned the emergency broadband benefit. So we're part of a national association, the Council of Large Public Housing Authorities. So there is, in addition to, I think, the city pushing the federal government to be able to administer that benefit, housing authorities across the country are asking the FCC if we can be considered a provider for the purpose of sharing that. That's not been determined yet, so we'll watch that and try to help out with that if we are allowed to do so.
When you said, who laid the fiber optics? You said fiber optics wasn't there before, you said, right?
The city of Boston is doing that so that they're laying fiber cable to a number of city buildings that have included the BHA buildings in that project. I mean, they have contractors doing it for them, but they're paying for it. The city's paying for it.
The city's paying for it.
Yeah,
Up until it gets to the site, and then we have to.
You would need to pull in like the Do It folks to get a more detailed answer, but the short one is that as a condition of the legal franchise for companies like Verizon and Crown Castle, some of the other cable service providers, they're providing some benefits to the city, and some of those including, they get to expand their business network. They provide certain services to the public.
It's Mike Lynch.
Yeah.
Our partnership with Mike Lynch.
It's a process called dark fiber, where when fiber providers are running fiber optics through the city, the most expensive part is to dig up the street.
Right.
And so while you're laying down a strand of fiber optics, you might as well lay a bunch more. And so the city has been able to benefit from leasing what they call what's called dark fiber. The fiber that was laid down in the street has been unused. So that dark fiber is what has been run to schools, it's been run to BHA programs, and it's been provided to the city through the leasing agreements with both Comcast and now Verizon.
Right.
But
and it's in process.
My internet uses fiber optics. Why isn't it that public housing hadn't had access to it before? I'm trying to figure out. Why wasn't it there before?
So very few parts of the city have fiber optics to houses because it has been has been Comcast that has been the main provider. And so now Verizon, through their new franchising agreement, have been running fiber optics. So, you know, that is one of the challenges of Boston, is that with Comcast being the only provider, there hasn't been as much. However, I guess you could say enterprise level fiber going to schools, going to housing.
Right.
There is actually an enormous amount of fiber in the city for that. It has been for years. As the city was looking to expand Bonet, we're looking at maps of where all the fiber is in the city. You've got all these companies that you've never heard of, Synesis, Crown Castle, that have just fiber optics laying in the streets that we've been able to lease and utilize. So.
And that fiber optics is laying in the street is mostly Comcast, been laid by Comcast?
You know, Comcast is probably the only name you'd recognize, but you know,
Yeah.
Crown Castle, Synesis, these are companies that have had fiber in the streets for years underneath the ground. But Comcast and Verizon are more the consumer focused providers.
Interesting.
I
Little
have
messy out there, isn't it?
Yeah, in Dorchester, it is Verizon and not Comcast that
Right.
is doing the fiber optic. But I have a question. Why is it that Comcast seems to be the only provider that has like an in with the city? Boston Public Schools, Boston Housing Authority. What is it? Why Comcast?
I think as far as, I think their service is universal and they had offered that Internet Essential program earlier. I think, you know, that we're happy for multiple providers, which is one reason why, as Lydia noted, we're happy with this new partnership with Starry. We're happy to see other options. We're really thrilled that the city is bringing its own public, the Bonet services that benefit both BHA itself and residents. So my opinion on that, and welcome other ones, but I think Comcast has just had has its business operation very built out, so you can access
Right.
you can sign up for Comcast almost
right.
everywhere.
Right. Comcast rolled out at the BHA like years ago, right? And there weren't other service providers. At one point, we did try to roll out with RCN and this goes back like quite a while. Had, I think, a contract with them or almost had a contract with them, and then they pulled out. So, and Comcast, you know, was the cable provider that came in and, you know, they work with the city to get their cable franchise license and all of that kind of thing. Quite much earlier, Verizon wasn't in the picture for that use at that time, right? And Starry wasn't even formed at that time. So I don't know all the history of it, but Comcast just was one of the early internet service providers in the city, and there weren't others, right? It's a for-profit business, and there just wasn't a whole lot of competition.
The licensing.
So we never turned anybody away, that's for sure.
Yeah, the licensing agreements are, and this is where I want to speak out of turn in terms of what my knowledge of this, but it is something that Comcast has had an exclusive contract to be the cable provider within Boston for a number of years. So this year, when we, in the Boston Public Schools, when we looked to support the Internet Essentials program, the primary reason was because we knew that Comcast was available in all parts of the city. 5 years from now, Verizon is going to be in all parts of the city as well. They're in the middle of building out their infrastructure. But at the moment, you know, these cable providers, these cable companies, their licensing agreements are negotiated and controlled with cities.
Mark, repeat again, they have an exclusive license for.
So Comcast had an exclusive license in Boston. So when you were a resident of Boston, there were no options.
There were no options. Yeah.
You were only able to work with Comcast.
Until Senator Markey lifted and made everything that you had to compete, and there were no longer essential exclusive licenses in cities. That was what the legislation did.
Yeah, and I'm not familiar with the
Yeah.
specifics. I know that Boston signed a licensing agreement with Verizon a few years ago.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Right, and Verizon is installing at BHA sites as well, so they're in process of doing that.
You think if you had a license with the city and you're have fiber optic that you're laying, you think you could, as part of that negotiation, have them bring it right into your public housing rather than the city paying for it. Anyway, so why don't we have see if the student who's doing this would like to ask some questions or add anything to this.
Talia is not here today.
Oh, Talia's not here. Okay.
She's in class, but
Okay.
she will be reviewing the recording.
Going to class.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, okay. All right. So does anybody, so the question I have is, how do we make this better? One thing I'm hearing is the form itself, the Comcast complicated process. It's not just the form, it's the process. You'd think, Mark, if you gave someone a voucher, that should be enough, right? You're saying this person needs a voucher that they can show, it should be enough, right?
Yeah, the sign-up process is, as we know, is one of the main barriers for families, and oftentimes our families are going through very difficult situations or moving locations, and the common theme that I've heard is outstanding debt. So even if they are able to get through the form, even if the form isn't a barrier, challenges that a family has had with Comcast services again in getting reconnected.
Right. And just to add on to that, because Comcast has been the provider in the city, like for the BHA, many of our families have been connected up with Comcast and could potentially have that past debt.
And there's no way to get around that.
So Comcast has said that they are waiving past debt.
Right.
I think in reality, our families have found that that's easier said than done, or it's been a statement that hasn't quite permeated to everybody on the Comcast help desk, if I could say
That's
that.
for students.
Yeah.
And families, not for BHA, as far as you know.
I think it's for everybody, but we have the same experience, so we refer somebody over to Comcast, but it's hard. There's the staff person and the resident and then the ISP, right? And you send the resident off to go call the ISP and stuff happens, and then they may or may not come back and tell you what happened, but they get tangled up, right?
Yeah.
Then they come back and tell you, and they got tangled up, and then you have to go back and you have to try to untangle it. And sometimes you can. It's very one-on-one and labor intensive, frankly.
Yeah, so this is a Comcast problem that needs to get straightened out at Comcast, that they need to get better. And you had a question.
My question was mostly answered about waiving for fees, and if it did include the elderly and disabled. And if it didn't, is there any grant money available to pay off those debts so that people can have access?
Yeah, that's the same thing I was trying to get at, right? But it sounds like that they waived it, but as a policy, but the policy doesn't get communicated throughout the company.
Yeah.
Is there a way to have, excuse me, one designated customer service rep at Comcast? I know where I work, we've paid off a lot of utility payments, and it was always hard with utility companies until they designated someone for us. And then it was a lot easier for us to work through those.
Designated a number, it might not be a person, but it's a number, and only certain people answer that line.
So we actually have both. We have a dedicated line where our families are given a specific phone number. It's not public, it's not advertised.
Right.
And then we also have a rep. And I can't say I can't say enough about our rep that she is able to get through everything. The only case that she has not been able to get through is when a student was under the age of 18 and wanted to sign up on their own. And I understand due to different situations, they may not be able to waive that, but she's gotten through any sort of past debt. She's gotten through very difficult and tricky situations. So having that rep has been great. Having a dedicated line is also helpful. But it is a challenge.
Even with that, it's a challenge.
Mhm.
But the housing people, you don't have what Mark has in terms of a dedicated
I
line.
mean, we work with the rep and she is very helpful. I don't think we have a dedicated line.
So that's where you ought to ask for it, the
But
minimum.
yeah.
A dedicated line that you can give that phone number to people and at
Mhm.
least they get an
Mhm.
answer. That's a
Mhm. Yeah.
just thing.
And
Yeah,
and for somebody who just needs a connection and that connection works, that would work. Many of our, especially if we're talking about the elderly disabled residents,
Yeah.
that's one step in the
Right.
process, but
Right.
that's not enough.
Yeah.
But it is, yeah. I mean, the connection's
So
important.
you guys are, soaked in this and deal with it every day. Why isn't Boston a city that just doesn't have free internet?
That's
Like,
really a
you
city
go to Europe,
question.
or you go to some city and you just open up your computer and there it is.
Same way we don't have free TV anymore.
Yeah.
It's right.
I mean, I can give you an example. So the BHA did a pilot with Starry, which is not something we can necessarily repeat because it would cost money, and they are at the end of the day a for-profit company and we don't have the money, but we did do a pilot with them at our Estonia development, which is an elderly disabled development in the North End, where they put access points throughout the building. It's completely free common area Wi-Fi. It happens to bleed into many of the resident units, even though that was not promised, but they said that might happen. and the residents love it. It's easy for them to sign up for. It's there. It's just there. And we have some very tech savvy residents in that building. And we also have residents who want absolutely nothing to do with internet and never want to connect to Wi-Fi, whatever, but it's there. And it is, I mean, that, in my opinion, is what people really need. They just need something in place that's easy to connect to and that doesn't cost any money. Getting that done is a whole nother ball of wax, like broadly. And, I can't answer that question like for the whole city or even for the BHA, because right now we have no mechanism. I do feel like the partnership we have with Starry will, at least get us to some free common area Wi-Fi within the developments, that they're rolling out another option in addition to the Comcast Internet Essentials option for a monthly, it's a $15 monthly fee. It is a different download and upload speed, so the connection might be useful for people. And then as we can roll out on the city's fiber BONET piece for other sites for common area Wi-Fi, that's kind of what we're trying to get to. So even if you can't afford your own connection in your own unit, you can go down to a community room and sit at a desk and a computer and connect if you need to.
See, I don't
right?
understand in public housing, where to get into public housing, you already have to be poor. And
Right.
if you're elderly and disabled and you're in public housing, why don't these companies provide it free? I mean,
Yes, and the
I
same
don't
thing.
understand it.
Same thing with Boston Public Schools. If the student already qualifies for certain services at Boston Public
Free
Schools,
lunch.
they ought to be immediately accepted into.
Well, the difference in Boston Public Schools, though, because the percentage of students in Boston Public Schools for free or reduced lunch is so high, everyone's eligible. So you could make the argument that you have people in Boston Public Schools who are making $500,000 a year, which is true. So they're not all poor, even though they get free lunch, because it's the law is such that if you have so many, it's easier just to give it to everybody. But in housing, everyone has to qualify, and That should be part of the license. To be in our city, you know, if you're in public housing, elderly public housing, disabled public housing, ought to be part of your license, let it be free.
Mhm.
Just in
Yeah.
in the building, public housing. I think one of the things, Rach, that your folks ought to look at, is that true in other cities? Is that provided by anybody, Comcast or
I
Verizon,
don't think
in,
so.
in public housing?
Not to my knowledge, no.
It'd be interesting to look at,
Mhm.
to see.
Yeah,
Wrong
I
with
think
the country.
there are some things that vary city to city. We talk to other housing authorities. I know
Yeah.
the school systems talk to other school systems. One of the
Yeah.
things I just wanted to mention is that this is not, you know, we're not involved in this directly, but
Right.
the agreements with internet service providers that the municipalities have do come up, or they're amended from time to time. So
Right.
it's always worth paying attention to that
Yeah,
process.
yeah,
The other thing I want to mention really briefly, I think it's amazing actually that Boston Public Schools has been able to get this voucher. I think
Yeah.
Comcast first was sponsored service, but it's where they can really, when they can get people signed up, and many people have been, right? BHA has looked into doing the same thing, particularly with our recent federal relief. Until recently, we have not been allowed to do that because HUD has prohibited it. So it's
Yeah.
changed a bit very recently, but particularly at the beginning of the pandemic, we looked into, could we sponsor service for residents? And there were so many different barriers to us functionally doing that it just wasn't, we just shifted course. From our survey though, we looked at cost of internet and cost of devices as being the two top barriers. So we've looked at, again, the free public Wi-Fi, and then can we just buy devices for people similarly to, and not on the scale that BPS has, but other sets of folks who may not be public school students. So as Lydia noted, like our resident leaders, we absolutely need them to be, you know, able to engage, provide input on how we operate, you know, tenant organizers and tenant leaders. So we are getting them online. They help other residents as well.
Shouldn't be so hard. Shouldn't be so hard. All right, other people have questions for our guests here? We really appreciate it. And we know you do a lot of work to make this happen, and I'm surprised Mark can still talk and walk. Well, we haven't seen you walk, so maybe you can't walk, Mark, we don't know. But it's been quite a year for you, I know that. And I know people appreciate all you've been able to do, which is, you know, like climbing Everest 3 or 4 times to get and all you've heard is a lot of complaints I know, about how it didn't work, when it didn't work. But it's amazing that it's gotten done as well as it's gotten done. So thank you, and thank all of you for coming and sharing with us. And we're going to try to figure out how we can be more helpful. I'm not quite sure what the answer is yet, but we know it's more difficult than it should be. And we're looking at ways that you know, it clearly has an impact on Black and brown disabled people, elderly people in a disparate way. So we're trying to figure out if there are ways that we can be more helpful and streamline the process as well. So I appreciate it. Thank you for joining us. You're welcome to stay or go. We're going to be done shortly anyway. So thank you though, appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah,
Thank you.
anytime. We just wanted to mention, Evandro and I wanted to mention that I think that all of you may have seen the complaint that was filed against the city for discrimination in procurement. I have talked to one of the plaintiffs in the case, the Latinx group, so it's just started. I'm going to get some information on it, but you saw the numbers. They were startlingly low of both Latinx and Black and women. you know, it looks like you had to work at it to get them that low. I mean, they were really, really low. And so as you saw, the mayor has done an executive order and putting some goals in and created an advisory committee. So Susan and Evandro, we ought to find out more about that. And again, something we should, I think, keep our eye on. It's one of those things where there are goals and there is an advisory committee, and at the end of the year, you look at it and nothing's changed. That's a problem. So, you know, we ought to look at it sort of quarterly and see what's happened, or at least at the end of 6 months, see what's happened and has anything changed? Because it's so easy to make goals and then at the end of the year, you look at it, nothing happened. Just like these cadet programs, you know, they're done for a reason, then people forget the reason they were done. Is there anything else that we want to bring up today? Yes, Ben.
So I read the Title VI complaint, and it
Yeah.
made reference to a disparity study that the city did, which I
Yeah.
assumed that they did because they wanted to be able to justify some sort of change in policy that
Yeah.
would give preference.
Exactly.
Do we know what the plan is here?
Yeah, John Barrows, actually, I talked to him too. They actually commissioned the study and paid for it. It got leaked before they were ready to talk about it, is what happened. The plan was to, you know, release the study and have a plan ready. But what happened is it got released early, and then they didn't have a plan ready, but the mayor did an executive order, which then set these goals and put an advisory group together. So I don't know what the plan was going to be or is going to be that Barrows was going to do, but I assume we'll hear about it. So that was going to be the plan, to release it and you know, release a plan to go with it.
Everyone knew what the outcome was going to be. They could have put the plan together before they even asked for the study.
Before they paid for the study, that's right.
But if you want to have a supplier diversity program that
Right.
race conscious, then you better have the disparity study to back it up.
I'm not saying they shouldn't have done the study.
Right, yeah.
Done the study, but they could have had the plan ready for when the study came out, because
Yeah.
you knew.
Yeah.
I see what, absolutely.
Yeah, right. And
it was not a shocking study.
No, it's not a shocking. It was actually, to tell you the truth, I was shocked. I was
shocked it was that low. I was
that
shocked it
low.
was
I was
that
not
low.
shocked it was low. I was shocked it was that low.
Yeah,
I was shocked it was that low. I mean, I found that really, that's what surprised me. So, so we should keep an eye on that, and let's find out who's on that advisory committee, and let's make sure we know what the goals are. And try to, I assume this sits with John Barrows, does it? Let's find out.
He's stepping down, though.
He is stepping down. Let's find out who is responsible for these goals.
I would like to question, you know, but is Commissioner Crockett going to take care of this? Who is in that advisory committee, and would somebody from that committee come talk to us?
Good point. Who's responsible to enforce these goals?
Yeah.
Because procurement is done throughout the government. It's not one place. So who's responsible for these goals and to ensure they get done? Let's find out and ask them to come. I think that's great. Okay. Public comment. So members of the public will now have an opportunity to comment. You can raise your hand or type your questions in the chat via the Zoom meeting platform. If you are calling in and cannot use the platform, you can press 9 to raise your hand, or you can send your questions to the staff via email at susan.hemley@boston.gov. So, Susan, have you received any questions during this in the chat or anywhere else?
No, but I did receive a text from Director Carvalho who said he lost power in his house. So in other news, no, I
Isn't
don't have
that-
any other questions.
Was it Comcast that turned off his power, or?
I'll ask him.
All right, okay. So I think that we ought to ask the person about the procurement who's in charge. And I think we ought to ask Comcast to come in and help us out here.
And Verizon.
And Verizon. From Verizon. But I would like your folks, Rez, to see if in any other cities there are deals that are made for public housing or schools. I'd like to know that. Or
I think Priska, who is actually, she is attending this meeting and is doing the human rights cities.
Right.
She could probably find that very easily. So
Great.
I'll take care of that. Yeah.
Let's try to find out. Okay, guys. See you next month. Take care.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Thanks, Susan.